Yo folks, Rhino here. I want to start with a story from graduate school. In applied behavior analysis for my master's degree, there was a course in which we talked about philosophical foundations and the importance of knowing what your philosophical foundations are and the impact that it has on the clients you serve and really how you operate and move about the world. You'll notice I said it was the last class, last semester that we talked about these sort of things. And I distinctly remember our final class covering the concept of free will, talking about deterministic worldviews that you get in the natural science, the implications of those on things like free will. In short, the idea is that our behavior, everything that we do, is determined by something going on with an interaction between ourselves and the environment. It could be our history, epigenetics, genetics, it could be a whole slew of different things, but it takes kind of this agency, this central I am the director of my behavior, and puts it into a lot of different variables, which can make people uncomfortable. It can actually have direct conflict with things like religious beliefs, other philosophical assumptions that people hold and maybe don't always know or articulate. So as you can assume, what happened is there was a number of people that had kind of read into this and understood this before they got into their master's program, but there was a number of people that were not quite sure how to feel about this. And the fact that it was the last class of our last semester in which we were really tackling this topic, it did a couple things. In the moment, it actually led to people being quite, not unprofessional, but a little hostile towards each other. Like there's a lot of active disagreements. I remember at some point saying you got into a field that was deterministic and this is what you got into. How did you not know this is what you're getting into? I didn't know at the time. That kind of sounds like you're pointing the finger and blaming somebody, but it was just this realization of holy cow, if you're not quite sure what you're getting into, it can really change your perspective of a field and maybe change what career you want to get into. And our class didn't really come to a consensus. The clock hit, it was done. There was no more time to talk about things. Graduation was in a few days and that was it. We all just kind of walked out. And I've reflected on that a number of different times because for me, I was very fortunate to have things passed on to me and this assumptions kind of explained to me and I dealt with it early on. But it was apparent then, and it's apparent even more now in some of the online teaching that I do, that people just don't quite get enough of this philosophic foundation as to why it's important. So I want to share a book and a resource today, as well as try to explain as to why you should even consider this and where you can go purchase this. So if you're looking at an ABA program, there's a number of different classes you should be checking out for. One of them would be on something on behaviorism, philosophical foundations, this one, radical behaviorism maybe, something that is getting you really into the philosophy and understanding what it is, where our assumptions come from and what those can potentially mean later on as you pursue this field. And the main reason I'm making this is these topics are talked about, but very briefly, and they have huge implications. That and it should be much sooner. In my case, the last semester, the last course, tackling some of the most profound things that can impact as to whether or not I want to pursue this sort of field. Those sort of things are really huge. And so I have two things that I'd like to have you think about a little bit today. Can your philosophical assumptions, how you think the world operates and works, impact the way that you serve your clients? The short answer is yes, 100%. What school of thought, where you come from, can impact what services you deliver and how effective those services are, or how true you're saying to those services might be a better way to say that. Some ways in which this can matter is how you try to understand what it is that your clients are doing. That is what assessments you use, what methodologies you lean on, what things you prescribe as potential solutions, behavioral programs or treatments for different behavioral and mental health issues can 100% be impacted based on what it is that you assume and believe in the way in which the world works. I've made a video, for example, on the mind being kind of the myth of psychology. I stand behind that, and those sort of things impact potentially people that I work with, people that I train, things like that. This isn't a conversation on who's right. That's actually a whole different video on assumptions that I made. This is actually just on, do you know how these can potentially impact? Do you know where you stand and how those impact your potential client relations? The book I have sitting here is Radical Behaviorism for ABA Practitioners. I recommend this to anybody that's considering getting into this field, new to the field, or hasn't quite had a full experience as to how our philosophy really impacts what we do day to day. Made by James Jim Johnston. And there's a number of different areas. I always like to cover these really quickly. So the contents are nice preface on just saying what this book will and will not do. And it has a really nice structure actually throughout. He's discussing certain topics, but each one includes a text guide, box study guide, discussion topics, and exercises and suggested readings. So this is one of those perfect for a classroom, perfect for anybody that's like interested in this material, but also wants to learn more about it afterwards. So it's a great self-study tool. So the chapters include an unavoidable but reasonable assumption, that is talking about determinism. Then he hops into chapter 2, looking at things about verbal behavior, that is language. What is it, and do these sort of things like determinism hold? What are the implications of this? Chapter 3, never mind, starts to really question the mind, these sort of hypothetical entities that are out there that presumably influence all human behavior. Note here, it's very different than other areas of psychology. Seeing yourself, that is learning to talk about ourselves, the behavior of sensing, managing our behaviors, some really interesting philosophical things. The misdirection of everyday dialect. What is going on with reasoning? Is there anything special about it? Responsibility, that is, when can we actually hold somebody accountable? If we're looking at a circumstantial view, we're saying that these other environmental variables influence our behavior, are responsible for the reasons we do what we do. Can we really hold somebody responsible? Very interesting questions. Then he wraps up with talking about ethics, rights, and values, the social life, that is looking at natural selection, where this leads to for role of behavioral science when it comes to engineering cultures and trying to influence larger societies, and then really wrapping it up with a nice bow around like what is radical behaviorism. Now he has an example here that I wanted to read to you real quick. And he talks about, why does this matter for practitioners? So we'll jump in. Why does it matter what practitioners think about the issue? As the preface emphasized, practitioners talk with clients, families, and other professionals every day. The ordinary dialect of these conversations is rooted in a causal model in which individuals are assumed to be able to control their own behavior at least some of the time. This assumption that we are free to choose to behave one way or another is at least implicit and often explicit in discussions about behavior of both clients and caregivers. Because such behavior is seen as originating from within the individual, it complicates ABA practitioners' efforts to convince all concerned to focus on environmental factors that may be important in changing the behavior of interest. In which a scenario like this occurs, in which someone's free choice rather than environmental factors quickly gets in the way of effort to generate a discussion focusing on these environmental factors. So the clinician's ability to lead the group toward a possible environmental intervention depends on the practitioner's familiarity with these same issues. That is, the practitioner must be able to recognize the underlying philosophical issue, have already figured out their position based on their professional training, and know how to lead others to see that focusing on environmental variables is likely to be useful. So, if the practitioner was unfamiliar with the issue, they would be less likely to be able to lead the discussion in a clinically beneficial direction. Worse, they might wind up agreeing with Liz and Sharon and fail to consider constructive environmental options for intervention and planning. So if you're not convinced that the environment and other variables outside of our own sense of agency or mind and these sort of hypothetical constructs can actually influence behavior, then this is the book for you. This is the book to consider if you're like wondering what behavior analysis is about. This is something to consider if you're an RBT, considering the BCBA route. It can be a little bit tricky sometimes. That's where you can lean on others in this field. I'd be glad to take any emails myself. But this is the book, coincidentally, that one of my first supervisors gave me here. You can see it's noted. And I wish was, I don't want to tell you all what to do, but like it really set the stage for like, what am I getting into? And I found that super useful. And in retrospect, the class that I was in, if I'd only relied on my master's program, I would have got this at the very last day of the very last semester, right before graduating. And it has some profound impacts for those, like I said, that are religious, spiritual. You can hold what you want to hold on to, but these sort of things clash if you're really trying to subscribe your entire life, entire worldview to something such as behavior analysis. So check it out, links down below, paperback version included. I get nothing from this, it's just a valuable resource. And a big shout out to my Patreon supporters, the links down below if you want to support this channel. I'll see you in the next one. That's your Daily BA.